Well, the accused 9/11 mastermind and his co-defendants caused quite the chaos at a hearing in Guantanamo Bay over the weekend. The hearing lasted a whopping 13 hours. This weekend's hearing for KSM, or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and his 4 defendants was, or I should say co-defendants, was supposed to take just a couple of hours and could have really been done in minutes. Some of their behavior included taking off the earphones that provided Arabic translations of the English court proceedings. Interpreters had to be brought in to translate live. Interpreting the proceedings to yell that the guards at the Guantanamo Bay prison were going to kill them. Insisting that the 20-plus page document detailing charges against them be read aloud. And then they took some of their clothes off, or partially disrobed, as the court put it. They read the magazine The Economist and made a paper airplane and placed it on top of a microphone. Quite the court proceeding. Defense lawyers for the suspected 9/11 mastermind accusing the government of rigging the trial to make sure he's convicted and put to death. Our senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano, is here. What to make of this?
Well, and not something to look forward to from the point of view of testing the patience of the judge. Look, everybody is entitled to be present at their trial, to confront the evidence against them, and to confront the witnesses against them. That has been tempered somewhat by the Military Commissions Act, which excludes the defendants from hearing certain witnesses and looking at certain documents. But when defendants engage in behavior that unnecessarily disrupts or lengthens to an intolerable point the trial, the court can exclude them and put them in a place where they can observe what goes on, but their antics won't interrupt. So they can, by their behavior, give up their right to be physically present in the courtroom.
You know, Catherine Herritt was at this hearing. Catherine, I wonder, how disrupting was all of this? It sounds like a bit of a clown show.
Well, I was at the first arraignment back in 2008, and these guys came into court trying to control the proceedings by acting as their own attorneys. This time they clearly came in with a strategy, and that was to frustrate and delay the process as much as possible. They refused to cooperate with the court in any way. They refused to answer questions, and then they refused to wear these headphones for the Arabic translation. But I would point out that 2 of them were reading the Economist magazine, and from what we can see, it's in English. So that was farcical. And there were other moments that were just kind of surreal. One of the suspects, Wali bin Attash, was wheeled into the courtroom in this restraint chair, kind of like Silence of the Lambs. And then once he was positioned, the guard went back outside and they brought in his prosthetic leg. I guess the guy in the restraint chair was going to need it. I mean, you just were kind of shaking your head, not really believing what you were seeing.
What can the government do?
Well, it's really up to the court to produce an orderly trial here. Now, this proceeding it would be likened to an arraignment. I mean, basically, the judge was saying to them, are you who the government says you are? Do you understand the charges against you? Do you know that you're in a courtroom? Do you have a lawyer? Do you know what your rights are? Normally, this is, in an American court, is pro forma and takes minutes. But obviously, as Catherine indicated, with all this excess behavior and inappropriate behavior going on, it took 13 hours. The court can exclude them and put them in a room where they can watch on closed-circuit television everything that's going on and enable them to speak to their attorneys in real time from that room into the courtroom. But if the court permits them to stay in the courtroom and they continue like this trial will take years. And of course, they haven't even gotten off the ground. They haven't even picked a jury yet. They're still at the very, very preliminary stages.
But this isn't allowed to continue. Judge, it's nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Massachusetts banning bake sales during the school day and now wants to expand the ban to include evenings, weekends, and community events. I call that a buzzkill.
But can government really regulate you on what you put on your plate? Let's talk to Fox News senior judicial analyst and dietitian, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Now, good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Now, keep in mind, they're talking about banning the sale of these foods for fundraisers, foods that are legal.
Well, absolutely. I mean, basically, the state of Massachusetts has decided what it wants children to eat in the school and at home. And it is using authority that the Supreme Court of the United States gave to it. I'll explain that in a moment.
Bong hits.
To do so. You remember that crazy case, Bong Hits for Jesus? A meaningless phrase that some kid put up on a placard and held in front of a parade off school grounds and after school hours.
Right.
And the school disciplined him for it. And the Supreme Court said, yes, as long as students do something off school hours and off school grounds that might affect another student or might adversely affect the school's mission, the school can regulate that behavior. So using that sort of amorphous line of authority, the Department of Education in the state of Massachusetts wants to regulate the behavior of students and their parents after school hours involving student bake sales, and basically saying, because cupcakes are not good for young people, we don't want anybody selling cupcakes, even if it raises money for after school programs.
It's so dumb. Sorry. It's just so dumb.
It's unconstitutional.
You gotta wonder, does it have anything to do with the fact that Massachusetts was the first state to pass health care? Does it have anything to do with that?
I don't know. The people in Massachusetts are claiming they have good motivation, that they're worried about childhood obesity, and they're worried about people eating too much sugar.
But it's all about personal responsibility.
It's about personal responsibility, and it's about the overreach of the government. I honestly don't think the Supreme Court ever intended, when it said you can punish the kid for the Bong Hits for Jesus sign, that this type of reaching into the home by a school board would happen, and that's what's happening here. Can't we make our own decisions as to what we eat and not bow down to bureaucrats?
Well, you got to feel sorry for the schools, because these fundraisers, the bake sales, actually make the money, and going forward, they need the money. Judge, thank you very much for dropping by and infuriating.
Where are those cupcakes on Wednesday?
I'm going to bring you one tomorrow, just on purpose.
Well, if you have a cell phone, you really have to listen up to this. Alarming new findings about using your cell phone after hundreds of law enforcement agencies admit to tracking Americans through their phones without their consent. That is not legal, by the way. Is the government violating your Fourth Amendment rights? I have a feeling of what Judge Andrew Napolitano is going to say. He's Fox's senior judicial analyst. Judge?
The answer is, if the government does this without a search warrant, yes, it is violated.
But how would I know? How would I know if they're doing that?
You wouldn't know, because this device, and we all carry these, especially in this business, so we can be in touch with our producers and our colleagues, has a GPS device in it. And the government has software which would allow it to access this GPS device and follow this wherever it goes. So if it's in my pocket, it can follow me. The government admits that it is doing this, but it is reluctant to use evidence obtained from this in a courtroom, because that will place the constitutionality of its practice in front of a judge, and then a series of appellate judges, and maybe even the Supreme Court, which will say you can't do it. Now, why do I say the Supreme Court will say you can't do it? Because in the past year, the Supreme Court came down with two rulings. One said the police can't plant a GPS device in a car where the driver does not have his cell phone with him without a search warrant. The other said the police can't stand outside of your house with some sort of a sophisticated surveillance or monitoring device that would enable them to find out what you're doing inside the house without a search warrant. So it is clear they can't use this to follow you without a search warrant, and it is clear that they know that.
Is it a little bit of a slippery slope in that we all carry cell phones? We know that in most cases that they can be tracked when they're on. And so it's kind of out there, all this information in the universe, and quite frankly, very few of us know exactly what's out there and exactly who's taking a look at it.
Well, it's a great question, Jenna, because privacy, the right to be left alone, the right protected by the Fourth Amendment, is one of those things that changes as time changes. The linchpin of privacy, what is private, is what you expect to be private.
Well, let me...
So if we soon expect that these things will enable the police to follow us, does that mean we no longer expect privacy when we have them in our pockets?
Well, you have to think about the people, you know, the annoying people at the grocery store. They're having a full-on personal conversation in the fruit aisle. You know, and they're not really expecting privacy there, Judge,
well,
so why are their conversations
certainly not expecting privacy in the end of the conversation that we have, but they probably don't think that the government is listening to them. But look, the government has better things to do than listen to a person in the fruit aisle.
We hope so.
But do we really want to live in a society where the government knows everywhere we've been and can almost anticipate where we're going to go, and where the government can use this to listen to a conversation that you and I are having, even when it's turned off? The only way to disable this from becoming a listening device is to disable the battery. Do we want to live in a society where the government does that, no matter how well intended the government might be? Or are we so afraid of what's happening around the world that we want the government to know everything about us?